This is Open to Debate. I'm John Donvan, your moderator-in-chief. Hi, everybody. Our debate in this episode takes on a couple of pretty easy-to-understand questions, at least conceptually. Could longevity science extend your health span by decades? Should the government fund it? That is, fund the research, because the research is underway already. And how promising it is or is not. That is one of the things we hope to learn about in this one. Just to be clear, we are not talking about extending lifespans themselves per se for their own sake. It's not about adding more years just to have more years. We're talking about extending health spans, the span of years in which we're truly living in full health, physically and mentally vigorous. As you know, there's a gap between lifespan and health span, and sometimes it's decades of difference depending on the individual. But can research close that gap, and should tax money go toward it? That's what we're going to address in this one. Again, the questions before us: could longevity science extend your health span by decades? Should the government fund it? So let's meet our debaters. Answering yes to both questions, we have Peter Diamandis. Peter is founder and chairman of the X Prize Foundation, which leads the world in operating large-scale incentive competitions. He announced the X Prize Health Span competition, and his newest book is called The Longevity Guidebook: How to Slow, Stop, and Reverse Aging and Not Die from Something Stupid. Peter, welcome to the program and to the debate.
Pleasure, John.
And here to argue no to these questions, I want to welcome back to our program Zeke Emanuel. Zeke is an oncologist, an author, a bioethicist, and vice provost for global initiatives at the University of Pennsylvania, as well as the founding chair of the Department of Bioethics at the National Institute for Health. Zeke, welcome back to our program. It's great to have you.
Great to be here. Thank you.
So let's get on to our opening statements. We want to give each of you a few minutes to explain your position. Peter, you're up first. You are arguing, yes, longevity science could extend your health span by decades, and the government should fund it. Here's your chance, please, to tell us why, Peter.
Fantastic. Let's jump in. So first of all, I want to define, health span and lifespan. Lifespan is how long your heart's ticking. Health span is how long you've got vitality, that you're enjoying life, that you can move, look good, remember who you're speaking to. My argument is going to focus on the notion of adding 20 healthy years, 2 decades of health span for Americans today. So, the average life expectancy for Americans today is about 79, but the average health expectancy only takes them to 60 or 63. The last 16 to 20 years, they're in ill health. So the question is, can we match lifespan and health span? Can we give Americans an extra 20 healthy years? And should the government fund it? So let's talk about, can we? From a evolutionary standpoint, humans never lived past age 30. 100,000 years ago, you were pregnant by age 12 or 13. By the time you were 26, 27, 28, you were a grandparent. When food was not abundant, the best thing you could do to perpetuate the species was to die. And it truly was a notion that a number of scientific breakthroughs and processes, right? Clean water, sanitation, antibiotics, vaccines, modern medical care, surgery, improved nutrition, all these things have gotten us from 30 upwards of 79, we'll call it 80 in terms of life expectancy. So the question is, can we do better than that? Can we move life and health expectancy? So what's causing people to lose the last 20 years of health? Is it genetics or is it lifestyle? And the point I want to make here is that we now have the ability to modify both, right? It turns out that from a genetic standpoint, your lifespan is only about 30% attributable to your genetics. 70% or more is attributable to your lifestyle of what you're doing. And so I think the answer is definitively yes, that we can. Today, there are 12 million Americans that make it to age 80. 10% of those, 1.2 million Americans, are healthy at that point. And so what can we do to support others getting healthy? I think there are breakthroughs, we can talk about these, on multimodal diagnostics, our ability to catch disease at the inception and prevent 7 out of the top 10 causes of death today. There are breakthroughs, and the major breakthrough coming this decade, which makes this decade very different than past decades, is AI, single cell sequencing, epigenetic reprogramming, CRISPR, gene therapies. These are technologies that are going to impact our health directly. And they were technologies never available before. Should the government fund it? Well, listen, here's the problem. If the government doesn't make this change, we are about to have a bankrupt healthcare system. 63% of healthcare professionals believe that without a breakthrough in longevity science, we're not going to have a financially viable healthcare system by 2030. Other points here, we are on a massive drop-off in our population. We need people to be living longer, to be healthy, to be engaged in the economy. The US total fertility has dropped into 1.65 births per family. 2.1 is the replacement. Places like South Korea and China have dropped to 0.8, eventually to 0.5. We're about to peak in total population and then fall off. Other arguments, in 2020, we are spending $1.8 trillion per year, right? That's $36 trillion over 20 years, fighting the four horsemen of disease, cardiovascular, cancer, neurodegenerative, diabetes. If we can prevent those costs, $36 trillion, it's very much worth it for the government to be making those investments. And of course, there was a paper written out of MIT, Harvard, and Oxford by Andrew Scott, Martin Ellison, and David Sinclair, saying that the estimated economic benefit for the US over 20 years of reversing 20 years of health is $100 to $200 trillion. We're talking about tens.
Peter, I'm
to
sorry,
hundreds
I've
of
got to
trillions
jump.
of dollars.
I've got to jump
Yeah.
in because you've hit
Okay.
time, but you can
Yep.
continue those thoughts in our conversation. Zeke,
Thank
you're
you.
up next. You disagree. You're arguing that longevity science could not extend your health span and that the government should not be funding it. Here's your chance to tell us why.
Well, I don't think we need longevity science to extend our lifespan. That's really what I believe. It's really important to try to understand what we are aiming for. And it does seem to me when we talk about longevity, Peter is on record as saying he wants people to routinely live to 122 or 200 years or maybe forever. That doesn't seem to me to be our goal. The other possibility is to ensure that people who now die young, die before they're 75, which is about a third of Americans, actually can live a full life. The first, trying to extend life beyond 100 years to 122, 200, is foolhardy and I think a big mistake. Trying to get everyone to live a full life at 75 is a worthy goal, and trying to get them to live a disability-free life to 75 is a worthy goal, and we don't need longevity science. We know what to do. Our problem is not we need some breakthrough like AI or epigenetics or something else that Peter is pushing. What we need to do is implement the 6 behaviors of wellness and longevity, which not only do we know, but they've been known for 2,500, maybe 3,000 years. Now let's remember that we're all going to inevitably decline. We have a natural limit to our lifespan, and J. Olshansky, who will be on here a little later, has recently shown that the increases in lifespan are actually slowing down even in long-lived populations that are way healthier than the United States, like Japan. There is a biological limit and a biological process to deterioration that's inherent in people. We have been promised we're going to have more, the longer we live, we're going to have less morbidity, we're going to have what's called the compression of aging. We'll get more health span. We've been sold this idea since 1980 consistently. Unfortunately, the last 45 years have not shown that to be true. We've saved more people from dying who had disease. That's an accomplishment. I'm an oncologist. I want to save people from cancer. But we have to be realistic. They end up with disabilities. So we save people from strokes, but they have paralysis on one side or they can't speak. Plus, we have to also be quite clear. When people retire, one of the consequences is that they become more passive. They end up sitting in front of the TV for 40 additional hours that they were working. And there are lots of social consequences of having people live longer. Who's going to pay for Social Security? Who are caregivers going to be? and what happens to innovation because older people are less innovative than younger people. So, what do we need to do to increase healthy lifespan? Do we need a potion, a pill, Peter's fountain of youth and water? No. We already know the 6 interventions. The first thing is, don't do stupid stuff. Don't smoke. Don't drive without a seatbelt. Don't take hard drugs. We know this. Second, most important thing is to have a robust social life. Family and friends get together and have people you're close to. Third, stay mentally engaged. Postpone retirement if you can, although many people do not want to postpone retirement. And do things that are valuable to others. That's important. 3, eat well, not just at the end of life, but you've got to eat well throughout your life. Exercise, cardiovascular exercise, strength training, and balance and flexibility. And finally, sleep, get 8 hours a day. Those are the 6 wellness interventions. We've known them for 2,500 years, and we don't need any new science. What we need to do is deploy them at scale, and the United States has been singularly bad at deploying them at scale. Doesn't require federal investment in research. It requires federal investment in getting people to do the wellness behaviors.
Thanks very much, Zeke. I'm just curious about, something about both of you in terms of your personal story. So this is not part of the debate. I don't want to go into depth in this, but I'm just curious about it, in a sense where your passion for this comes from. Because Peter, you were known for your passion, your investment, your focus being on, space research, outer space. You have in addition to an MD, you have a degree in astronautics and aeronautics. What was the switch for you? What made you turn to this issue of health span and longevity after having this interest in space for so long?
I think it was 2 things. One, I love life. And I think this is the most exciting time ever to be alive, ever by a long shot. The only time more exciting than today is tomorrow. And I want to see as much of it as I can. I think we're on the brink of making humanity a multiplanetary species. I want to see us move, beyond the body of Earth into the cosmos. And I think people need to have a really strong why to want to do the things that will give them the added decades of health span. And see my kids. I had kids at 50. I'm 63 now, and I want to see their kids and their grandkids. And I think these things are possible. I also think it's the greatest gift we can give humanity is an extra, few decades of health span.
Thanks a lot. So you're basically saying you would like to be around to see some of the stuff that happens in space.
I want to see it. I want to see it, and I think it's. It's a double dividend of benefit.
And Zeke, you've done a lot of writing, Zeke, but your most famous piece of writing, without question, 10 years ago, you wrote an article in The Atlantic called Why I Hope to Die at 75. This was not about a death wish, but you were basically making the argument, which I think will resonate with in your opening statement, that you feel that extraordinary medical interventions after the age of 75 just aren't worth it. And I'm sure that as the years have gone by, you've been asked again and again, well, have you changed your mind as you approach 75? You're now, I think, 67. Have you changed your mind as you've approached 75?
No, I haven't. And by the way, let's get clear. The author never picks the title, and I fought with The Atlantic over that title because I think it distorted my message. My message wasn't, I want to die at 75. My message is that I don't want life-saving medical intervention. So if I got cancer or something, but if I broke my hip, and I needed a hip replacement, I would take it. Or if I needed my cataracts removed so I could read books and watch plays, I would take it. I think the obsession of living a long time is a mistake. It wastes our time with all these little adjustments to maybe get another few seconds or minutes in life rather than figuring out how we can contribute to the world. And that, I think, is the most important thing. And what I would notice is, Peter, I want to live a long time to see it. Notice how passive that is, right? I'm going to just watch it. That is, I think, the mistake. we end up obsessing about longevity.
I'm gonna jump in because now you're debating, and I don't want to have the debate. I just wanted to understand your take on this, and I understand you're to some degree disavowing that headline, "Why I Hope to Die at 75." Thank you for the clarification. But I heard in our opening arguments, I think not just a fundamental disagreement about the value of putting emphasis on as much good life as you can get, but also just a disagreement about the science and the consequences of the science. Peter, you are a believer that the ability to add 16 to 20 years of healthy life to the human experience is really something that's very doable. You're citing the availability of new tools like AI and CRISPR and epigenetics. You're also making the case that this is a good thing for the culture in terms of having more healthy people when they're older would relieve the burden on America's healthcare system, which is costing an enormous amount of money, and having people healthy, not needing that system, would be a net benefit for society. Zeke, you are arguing, as you have already, that I think you sort of suggest that you think the emphasis on living more life, even in a healthy way, is a little bit fetishistic, that you say that we have already we know how to live healthily. We can do the things already. We don't need, as you said, a magic pill or a magic potion. So you're really disputing the notion that the investment in the science itself is really not worth it. But Peter, I want to take it back to you. Talk a little bit about what the science is doing, and really how will we know that the investment that is being made now is worth it without having to wait 20 years to see what the outcome would be? How do we convince ourselves now that that will happen when it hasn't yet happened?
Sure. But first off, Zeke, I'm not passive in any way, shape, or form. And my view of the future is one in which I'm remaining proactive in shaping it. I'm running 5 companies. I have 2 huge venture funds, and my goal is to uplift humanity and to make this future happen, and to be there and to enjoy it as well. So I'll just make that specific point, because anybody who knows me as not being passive at all. I also want to address a couple of points made. I'm not making the argument here for 122 or 150 or more. We can have that debate separately, and I'd look forward to that. Today, the conversation is, can we match lifespan and health span, get the average American to a healthy 80? And can we do that just with, without any new science, any new technology? And we've known these things, as you've said, for decades, centuries, millennia, but it's not happening. It is way too easy to just lie in bed and not go and work out, or to eat that last donut on the plate in the morning. So what's going to change people in doing that? It's not going to be wishful thinking. It's going to be new methodologies. It's going to be AI in our life. You can turn on your AI health coach that's going to say, hey, listen, here's an alternative. Take the stairs. Don't take the elevator. It's going to be technologies which are transforming our genes, because some people don't spike their glucose when they're eating a donut. Other people do. We're genetically different, and our ability to, if you would, change the deck of cards that we've been dealt is now possible for the very first time. You don't need to live with what you've had. Now, is it available today? No. Is it possible to see where we're going in the next decade? 100%. We have a genome and an epigenome, right? You have the same 3.2 billion letters from your mom and your dad when you're born, when you're 50, when you're 80, hopefully, when you're 100. And so why do we look different? We're running the same software throughout life. It is our epigenome, the control of which genes are on and which genes are off. And that is modifiable by many different factors. And our ability to restore an earlier epigenome has the potential for us to change our metabolics. There are incredible companies and I know this because I scanned 500 of them, and the technology they're going to bring to bear over the decade ahead is going to make this automatic and some ways
Peter,
magical.
Let me jump in to you said quite a bit, and I just want to give Zeke a chance to respond to some of it.
Yeah, it sounds more like hucksterism. We don't need that CRISPR, the AI, to get this solution. The problem, as I think you said is not much of this is genetics. Some of it is, but most of it is about lifestyle. The 6 wellness interventions I mentioned, don't be a jerk, have good social relationships, stay mentally engaged, eat well, exercise, and
don't retire.
sleep well is very important. And getting people to do those things is also important. And you don't need any additional CRISPR of this or epigenetics of that to get those things. It's an adoption problem, it's a behavior problem, and constantly selling people that it's a technology problem means that they can be passive about it. And that, I think, is the problem. It's a science problem rather than a behavior problem. And this is fundamentally a behavior problem. And let me just correct something Peter said. He said, people live 30 years, centuries ago, they lived 30 years and dropped dead. That's not true. Many people died by 5, and then if you got to 5, you tended to live older unless 3 things happened. You got a serious infectious disease, most likely smallpox, but not only smallpox. You died in violence, wars, and other things, or you died in childbirth. But many people lived to old age way back when. Benjamin Franklin is my great example of this. He lived to 84 years old, inventing in his 80s, making inventions in his 80s. He's quite unusual. He's an outlier, but that was written in the genes before, and it was about the kind of life you live. Today, our big problem is we've postponed mortality, but we haven't solved the morbidity problem. And the morbidity problem is not going to be solved by doing something to someone in their 50s or 60s. It's about getting people in their teens, 20s, and 30s to live more healthily. And that, again, is a behavior, not a technology problem. And Peter keeps selling us it's a tech problem.
I want to let Peter actually say what he's saying. So, Peter, you're back in.
So, first of all, the new book that I wrote, Longevity Guidebook, which comes out this month, talks about the fundamentals of diet, exercise, sleep, and mindset, right? Mindset is one of the most important things. There was a study in the National Academy of Sciences that said an optimistic mindset, this was on 69,000 women, 1,500 guys, showed us an optimistic mindset can add as much as 15% to your lifespan. I think mind over body is a fundamental thing. So I completely agree that those things, sleep, diet, exercise, and mindset, and what I call not dying from something stupid, understanding what's going on inside your body, are fundamentals, and they will get you so far. Now the question is, do we have additional tools? If we want to try and extend health span with what we've always had, fine, you can choose that. For me, I want to use the best of science available. And again, this decade is very different than any time in the past. The tools that we have to understand why some people live healthy to 100 years old and others are, have mortality and morbidity at 60. There's a reason. It's not random. There's something going on beyond just lifestyle. And I think you know this, Zeke. And so the question is why? And can we, in fact, generate the technologies that are required to support people, to make it easier for them to live those additional healthy decades? And I think
Peter, are you talking about reversing aging in any way? You haven't used that term, and I want to know if that's what you're talking about.
I'm talking about being able to impact the things that cause aging. So, there was a few papers written on the hallmarks of aging, identifying first 9 reasons why we age, whether it's stem cell exhaustion. I mean, the body, to be clear, while we did not, while some people 100,000 years ago did live longer lives, the average lifespan was under 30, and the body begins a slow, glide downwards. We're at peak health about 27, and then we start muscle loss decade on decade. We have hormonal losses decade on decade. We have a change in our stem cell populations will decrease by 100 to 1,000-fold in every tissue in the body. And you can accept that and say, that's just the way it is. Or you can use modern science to fight it. In the same way that modern science and technology we never could fly. We never could, communicate
So-
across the globe.
So
Technology
Look,
enables
look,
it.
there's a serious contradiction here in what Peter is saying. In his opening statement, he says, 70% of health span is about lifestyle, and then he proceeds to sell you all this stuff about altering your genes and altering this and that. The problem is the 70%, I'm a guy, focus where the money is, right? It's the 70%. That's what we should be focusing on. We know what those interventions
Zeke,
are.
I agree with you.
Let me finish, Peter. I respected you.
Yes.
We know what those interventions are. And the issue is about having a society that encourages the adoption of those interventions early in life so that you can establish healthy habits and you can have your body programmed in the right way. The problem in our society, just take one example, school lunches, 70%, 60 or 70% is ultra-processed foods, okay? We're poisoning our kids, and this RFK is right about. We're poisoning our kids, okay, instead of giving them a way to live a healthy lifespan. And we do this in oh so many ways. It's not about we need another breakthrough in science, and so we're on the verge, and that'll give us a pill that we'll take at 65. The problem is that we have overcome a lot of mortality and expanded our mortality year on year, but our morbidity has not decreased.
I want to jump in. I want to jump in the interest of time.
John, the morbidity.
Zeke, I'm jumping in because you've made the point, and it's getting repetitive. And that's not a critique of you. I mean, our conversation has begun to go a little bit circular, and I want to move on to the second piece of this, which is the question of government funding science. And you both have addressed this in your opening. But Peter, to take it back to you, like what is the dividend in your view, if the government were to fund this research, and if the research were to produce the outcome that you're talking about, which, by the way, we'll stipulate, Zeke is saying it never will. And we'll come to him. But what are you arguing would be the dividend for?
So first of all, I want to say that the science and technology that I'm proposing the government support and fund are things that will change lifestyle behavior, right? So I wear a CGM all the time to understand what I'm eating and how it impacts and spikes my glucose. I'm wearing an Oura Ring to gamify and focus on sleep. I work out every morning. These things are fundamentals, and I fully agree with Zeke that these are important, but yet people do not do it. Do they know that these things are bad for them, eating a donut in the morning, or that not getting enough sleep? Yeah, they generally know these things. I agree we're poisoning our kids and ourselves with the food that we're eating, and I agree with RFK completely on all of this. As you said, we're on the same page there. But can we provide science and technology to make it easier for people to make the right choice? Because
and what would be the
lazy.
case? What would be the case to the taxpayer to have their money going to this?
We're talking about a 20-year increase in health span, and it is worth hundreds of trillions of dollars in the U.S. alone, right? And it's not just that; it's the fact that we're going to break our healthcare system, where it's fundamentally going to go bankrupt. So bankruptcy on one side, the saving of, let's call it 100 trillion on the other side, take 1% of that and invest it in the technologies and methodologies. It's not just better education. I think that people, we can get rid of the bad education for sure, but can we provide mechanisms that make it easier for people to make the right choices?
So Zeke, what I'm hearing, I think Peter's saying, is that the incentive for this for the taxpayer is that, 20 years from now, if he's correct, and this work can be done and this progress can be made, there would be fewer people taxing the healthcare system, fewer people requiring Medicare payments, et cetera, and that's a good thing. So can you take on that argument?
We've had this promise many times before, and it never seems to pan out. And I don't think this is going to pan out either. Again, we know the interventions. The challenge for us is not develop a new intervention or develop a new mechanism. The challenge is behavioral, psychological, and as I might say, the way we organize our society needs to be fixed. And that is not going to be by funding the NIH and having the federal government investigate CRISPR or epigenetics or any of the other things Peter would like them to do. This is we have a solution, it's a scalable problem, and it's really about developing people's healthy habits. And that's why it hasn't been taken up, because we keep making it a tech solution. And you see from Peter, he's obsessing. He's got an Oura ring that he monitors every day. He's got a continuous glucose monitor that is not what life is about. Life should be about putting all these things in the background, okay? Having healthy habits and not having to think about them every day, and pursuing the things that give our lives meaning, making other people's lives better, helping the world improve by working on the deficits we have in our globe. And
okay.
It seems to me what we've got...
You've made that point repeatedly. I'm asking the question
the federal
about
government's investment in tech through the NIH, which is what Peter's advocating, is not it. Maybe we need a federal investment in better habit formation early on. We need to change what we've done, our taxing policy, so buying ultra-processed food is not the cheapest alternative, but fruits and vegetables and eggs and dairy are better. Figuring out about exercise in school so kids do it as a matter of habit. These are things which they're a good investment. They tend not to be the things that the government is focused on. Peter hasn't mentioned them once. He's just mentioned all this tech stuff.
Okay,
and
let me take this question to you, Peter. Peter, I want to take this question to you. If you're right, if this work can be done, if the progress can be made, and if it's expensive, what are the possibilities that this is, these are benefits that are going to accrue to the wealthy and not to everybody else, particularly if the government can't afford to be involved in it? Do you have that concern, an equity concern?
I don't. So first of all, we are living during an exponential age. Trying to put into place solutions that harken back to 30, 40 years ago is, for me, an immoral action. We're not using the best technology that we have, right? We've got, AI exploding into the world today. We're all going to have a version of an AI diagnostician. We're all going to be dumping data into the network, and so that we know what's going on in our body constantly. It's interesting that the most powerful technology, John, generative AI, is effectively free to 7 billion people on the planet with a smartphone. These are democratizing and demonetizing technologies. And I think that this is an extraordinary time to be alive. And if health is the new wealth, if the greatest gift we can give anybody is health, providing them the most powerful capabilities and technologies to support the right decisions, to give them access to new medical interventions, better diagnostics, right? For most of us, 70% of heart attacks have no precedent, no shortness of breath, nothing. And we die from a soft plaque eruption versus calcified plaque. 70% of the cancers that kill us, like glioblastoma and pancreatic cancer, are never screened for. These things can be changed so we can not die from stupid things, first and foremost.
So,
that's the
Peter,
work that Fountain Life does.
I just want to clarify something about the framing of the argument that you're making in this debate. So the book behind you, on the shelf behind you, your new book coming out, has the word longevity in it. When you're talking about 2 decades, are you talking about people living to be 120, or are you talking about those last 2 decades of lifespan as it now goes, traditionally, not traditionally, conventionally now, to about 85? Are you talking about those last 20 years being healthier?
So for the purpose
or are you talking about both?
Yeah, for the purpose of this debate, I'm talking about adding 20 healthy years, matching, getting people up to healthy 80, right? At a minimum. This is, what the X Prize, and I'll talk about that later, is focused on increasing health span to match longevity. But yes, there are other technologies that will take us from 80 to 100. And for me, Zeke, you may want to die at 75 and not interventions. I want to see as much of life as I can. And I think that I think the technologies we're going to have that enable this are going to be demonetized technologies. All of the 8 billion people on the planet have the same biology. We have the same, so something that works for someone in Mozambique or Mumbai is going to work for someone in the Bronx as well.
We've had this promise of democratization. We've had, look at, we have some possibilities of changing treatments, changing genes, right? We've got gene therapies now. They're not democratized. They're $3 million a patient, and that is not going to be democratized. And I don't care what promises are made by Peter. That has not been the trend in medicine, that more high tech gets you more democracy. Just not true. And again, he keeps emphasizing it's tech, tech, tech. That's the intervention we need. It's behavior, behavior, behavior. And the intervention for that has to be early training in young kids and adolescents and young adults, and get them to have good habits. That is a much, much bigger problem than we have than taking a pill. This is not about taking a pill, and I think it's a mistake to sell people on the tech. And I would finally say this really, it's really not about this fetish of, I've got to live to 100. Right now, today, our research shows, the top 20% of Americans live to about 96 years of age. And the next 20% live to about 89 years of age. We already have 40% of our population living a long time. We should not invest a single penny in making them live longer. We've got to go to the bottom, where the average age of the bottom 20% at death is about 52 years old, and we have to move them up. And moving them up is, again, a lot of it is going to be about getting them healthier lifestyles in their teens and 20s. And that's a very different operation. That is not about a pill. It's not about taking something different. It's about changing how they live. And that's a different kind of investment than funding the NIH or the NSF.
Yeah, two things real quick. Yes, gene therapies for orphan diseases have been $1 million, $2 million, $3 million. But the mRNA COVID vaccines were a gene therapy. They were a gene therapy, and they cost $1 a dose. It's mRNA, it's a nucleic acid specifically put into cells. It's a proof case of what's possible. Listen, at the end of the day, Zeke, you can hope for 75. I think that's a depressing mindset. Or your mindset controls so much, you can hope to have the longest, healthiest life that you can. And for one, that's what I'm looking to do, and to support those who want to come on this journey. Because I think the technology enabling this is very different than the conversations we've had for the last 30 or 40 years. We're living during an exponential age, and we shouldn't be looking at it through a linear microscope.
So I want to bring in some people who have been listening to the debate so far. They are writers or thinkers or themselves researchers on this topic. And first up, I want to welcome Tanya Lewis, who is a senior health and medicine editor at Scientific American. Tanya, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for listening. And please come in with your question for our debaters.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So my question is about some of the research by Dr. S.J. Olshansky that suggests that human lifespan may actually have reached its upper limit, and we'll see diminishing returns from here on out. So I'm wondering if you could both address, whether or not it's worth investing in continued research to expand lifespan and health span, if we're only going to sort of hit this upper ceiling.
Look, I'm pretty clear about that, and I said and have said we should not invest in it. There is no justification for the federal government investing in taking people from 90 to 100, 100 to 110. Absolutely zero justification for that. Is there justification in trying to reduce morbidity and deaths of people who are 60 years old? And the answer to that is yes. Most of the morbidity reducing interventions are not going to be about tech. Some of the mortality reducing interventions are going to be about things like cancers or other illnesses that strike people young. Again, I'm an oncologist. Lots of women who had breast cancer before 40, lots of people now with colon cancer before 40. Again, probably those things Well, not probably. Those things are definitely not genetic. Those things are a result of the environment. You can't have such radical changes as we've seen in the last few years and have that because of genetics. So again, this is really about changing our environment and changing our behaviors. And I don't think, I agree with Jay's view that we probably do have an upper limit in human beings somewhere around 110, and we shouldn't invest in pushing that further.
Peter, the question again is, have we reached the point where lifespan cannot get longer, that, we're genetically predisposed not to go further at this point?
Again, we're debating extended health span versus lifespan, but to turn it to lifespan for a second, there are reasons that some individuals can be healthy at 100 years old, can have their mental faculties, a good metabolism, have their strength, and reasons that others are not. And once we realize that there is a discrepancy, the question is, can we raise the bar for everybody? And it's not just lifestyle there. You can have people in great lifestyle that are living earlier. So there is something going on in addition to that. And I think that is discoverable, right? We have 40 trillion cells in our body, each running somewhere between 1 billion to 2 billion chemical reactions per second. No human can understand this. This is an age of AI. This is an age of digital superintelligence that's coming over the next 5 years. And I think the biggest impact AI is going to have is being able to help us understand what's going on and how to extend our health span and our longevity. And I think we can take control of that. And if we can, that we should. It's the greatest gift we can give anybody. We need it from a population standpoint. We need it from a productivity standpoint. And I, for one, want it for my personal reasons, and I think others would as well.
Thanks very much for joining us, Tanya. And I now want to welcome in Venki Ramakrishnan, who is a Nobel Prize winner, former president of the Royal Society, and author of Why We Die, The New Science of Aging and the Quest for Immortality. Venki, welcome. Thanks for joining the program, and please come in with your question for our debaters.
Yeah, so I have a question for each of them. For Pete, I would have to say, what makes you think compression of morbidity is actually possible? Because almost all the evidence shows that as you improve health span, you're also increasing lifespan, with the result that the period of having 4 or more comorbidities has not declined as a fraction of our lives. In fact, we're spending more years with comorbidity. Many of us suspect that this movement by you and some of your like-minded colleagues is really an effort to extend lifespan, because the idea that you're going to improve health span but keep lifespan fixed just doesn't seem to have any evidence.
So,
Peter?
Venki, an honor to meet you and to speak with you. So thank you for your time today. Grateful for that. And the answer, of course, is yes, both is what we'd like. Can we, in fact, move health span up by 20 years and increase lifespan as well? Now, one of the things to realize is in those additional 20 years of health, science is not standing still. This is one of the fundamentals. We're at the steepest period of the curve, right? We just saw AlphaFold, AlphaFold 3, Alpha Proteo, the ability to use AI to design proteins specifically to go in and interact with a cell surface antigen, to, rather than the random walk in the Amazon to find some bioactive chemical and turn it into a drug. And our whole pharma industry is massively broken. We can have that separate conversation. And so I want to buy us additional healthy decades and, of course, additional life, during which additional breakthroughs will become possible. Now, the question is it from energetic, chemical, physical improbability that we can extend? I don't think so. We do have examples of bowhead whales living 200 years, Greenland sharks living 500 years and having babies at 200 years old. Life can do these things. Our ability to understand why and the underlying processes is what I'm so excited about during this next 20 years of exponential growth.
So exactly. So actually, Pete is not talking about just improving health span. He's really talking about improving lifespan. extending lifespan. And, that has a whole different set of problems, social problems. I mean, would you want Trump and Putin around in 100 years from now, still, running the world? I'm not so sure. Anyway, for Zeke, I have this question. People have asked me, because I've argued something along your lines, people have asked me, well, 150 years ago, we all lived to be, on average, no more than 40 years, and we've managed to double our lifespan. Would you rather go back? Are you against all the progress we made? And if not, why are you against further progress, maybe to double our lifespan even more? Once again.
Well, first of all, as you know, it's the on average that's the issue there. And I am for pushing the on average up. But if we do have a limit, which I think we do, and I think Jay and others have pretty convincingly shown, pushing that, investing to push that up is not something we should do. We need to take the bottom, people who aren't living to 80, 75, 80 years old, and we need to get them to be living a long, fruitful life, and that is what I think we should be focused on. And I am prepared to say that's something we should invest in. I think most of that investment is not going to be in tech and basic science. Most of that investment is going to be in the things I've mentioned, behavioral change and social change. And that's where I would put our effort. And let me just say, let me just say, if we keep pushing lifespan up, or try to push lifespan up, that only is going to help the rich and the super rich. That is what we're doing. Peter sells his gamishes for $19,000 per year, and all of these things that have happened, all the medical technologies, promise, oh, it'll be democratized, everyone will get it, but society pays for it, and we can't afford $3 million per patient for some gene therapy.
Okay.
And
Thanks
the
very
notion
much.
that mRNA vaccine
I'm breaking
is a
in,
gene
Zeke, because
therapy
we've got
is
to move on.
nonsense.
We've got to move on, Zeke. Venki, thank you so much for joining us. And now I want to bring in Corinna Loeckenhoff, who is a professor of psychology and a professor at gerontology and medicine at Weill Cornell Medical College. Corinna, thanks for joining us, and please come on in with your question.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm going to come at this from a psychological angle. Because let's be clear, if the technologies that Peter is advocating for come through, they could be adding decades to the lifespan for the people who can afford the technology. Now, my work on time perception shows that as we age, time seems to pass faster, each passing year seems shorter, and our personality and our sense of self become more settled. So you could be adding decades to life, but the gains in subjective lived experience are much shorter. What is the point then? What could you do in a lifespan of 120 years that you couldn't do reasonably in 80 years? And also, if we have limited resources, if we only have so much money for research, if our planet can only support so many people at a time, why wouldn't we be allowing a larger number of people live shorter but richer lives, rather than investing in longer lives for fewer people?
Really interesting question, Corinna. Thanks for bringing it into the conversation. That sounds to me, Peter, more of a challenge to your vision, so I'd like you to take that first.
In 2012, I wrote a book called Abundance, The Future is Better Than You Think. My next book in 2026 is Age of Abundance coming out. What we've seen over the last century, as much as 200 years, is up and to the right, increasing access to everything, that there is very little truly scarce, increasing access to energy, to education, to literacy, child mortality dropping, maternal mortality dropping, access to, all resources have been increasing substantially. And this has up-leveled much of humanity, taking us from 90% extreme poverty down to 10% extreme poverty around the world. I think this scarcity mindset that the news networks, right, CNN, I call the Crisis News Network, and so forth, are continuously bombarding us. Our brains are large language models, they're neural nets that are shaped by what we see, what we hear, what we feel. And when you're seeing all this negative news around the world, of course you think the world's going to hell in a handbasket, but it's not a valid view of what's going on the planet. You discard all of the advancements, all the amazing work that's going on. So I think that our ability to change how we see the future and create the future For me, the best way to predict the future is create it yourself. And I think we can create an extraordinary future and up-level every man, woman, and child on this planet.
So, Peter, I just sort of an implication I think I heard of the question is, I mean, do you see somebody being, 95 and deciding to change careers and go back to college at that age? Peter, do you see that as a possibility?
I think that people retire and shut down because of lack of energy, because of pain, because of morbidity. And I think those things can be changed by the technologies that I'm investing in, that I'm seeing, that I'm reporting on, that I write about in the book, that our ability to reduce full body inflammation by 50%, to reverse your muscle loss, to reverse your cognitive function. These things are being demonstrated in preclinical and early stage phase 1, phase 2 clinical trials today. And I think if you've got the energy, if you've got the mobility, if you've got the cognition, retiring at 65 is the last thing you want to do.
Okay, Zeke, thanks for your patience. You wanted to jump in there.
Yeah, actually, if we look at what happens to people, and by the way, this is true, just as true of healthy people as it is true of people who are lacking energy, what happens is they get to retirement at 65, and do they pursue mountain climbing or writing books or traveling to distant places or serving underprivileged kids and helping them to learn to read and write? That is not what actually happens. What actually happens is that we see a 40-hour-a-week increase in TV watching, passive life. And because I think people don't understand how to live a full life and don't stay mentally engaged, and we have not created a society to encourage that and a social network that makes that. It's not about a pill. It's not about more energy, because this happens with healthy people as well. And I think it's it's simply the tech will solve this, and that is not the way.
But what was your point about, you mentioned brain plasticity before.
Let me finish one other thing. People don't want to work more. Just look at France, that revolted in going from 62 retirement age to 64 retirement age, and the whole country revolted.
What was your point about brain plasticity before?
The point about brain plasticity is we all become set in our ways. Now, that's just a euphemism for our brain. It's like survival of the fittest among your neurons. And the pathways you use a lot, they get ramified and they get built up. And the pathways you don't, which are the new ideas and things that go to the side as you become focused, we don't rearrange our brain all the time. There are a few people who do have brain plasticity we don't exactly understand. I believe Benjamin Franklin was an example, and there are a few others. Verdi composed music into his 80s, but that's very, very rare. Most of us get set in our ways.
Is that a random effect?
We don't understand it at the moment.
Right, and that's where science and technology will enable us to understand what it is going on there. And the question is, if that's possible, would you not want to have it? And I think that people
I don't think we should be investing in the possibility of doing that. We should be more investing in getting people at the bottom up. You want the few people at the top to live longer and to have all the tech tools. I want everyone to live to 80. And that's the challenge. And that's not a tech challenge.
That's not the argument I made here. My argument is, how do we extend 20 healthy years from early 60s?
But as was pointed out, what you really want to do is extend longevity.
If you get a benefit of
in fairness to Peter and to this debate, that is what he was brought here to argue, and that is the case that he's making. Corinna, I want to thank you for your question. Now, the name S.J. Olshansky has come up a lot in this debate, and he actually is our next questioner. He's a professor at the School of Public Health at the University of Illinois in Chicago, chief scientist at Lapidus Solutions. Jay, welcome to Open to Debate, and please come in with your question.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Oh, and thanks for having this debate. And it's wonderful to hear from both of you. It really is. My softball question is really going to be pretty straightforward. I completely agree that extending healthy life should become the primary goal of longevity science and medicine in general, but the targets need to be realistic and scientifically testable. Shouldn't the targets be twofold? Extending healthy life faster than lifespan itself, so that morbidity is compressed. It hasn't been happening, as Zeke indicated, but that certainly would be a proper goal. And then, as you've discussed finding ways to develop and use longevity science to reduce lifespan and health span inequalities.
I think that's what I've been arguing for, Jay, and I completely agree with you. Our biggest, my view is our biggest problem is we need to focus on the bottom 40%, the 40% of people who don't get to 75, and that needs to be our attention. And if we keep arguing about, extending life, metformin to get us to 100, that will not be, our focus won't be on the bottom 40%. And that, I think, needs to be where our focus is. And I don't think that, again, I'm just going to repeat myself, this isn't a tech solution. This is a scaling problem, a scaling of the things we know work well.
A pleasure to meet you, Jay. And yes, I agree 100% with what you're saying. And that is the fundamental. Now, the question is, how do we do that, right? Do we do that by hoping? Do we do that by changing educational content in our schools? And there's so much change it has to be. We're not getting our kids ready for the future, let alone for a healthy life. You probably know the work of Arianna Huffington at Thrive Global. Yes. So Arianna is focused on using technology and AI to provide micro steps in your daily life that will de-stress you, that will help you make the positive changes in sleep, in diet, in exercise. And so technology becomes our partner. It becomes our daily minute-to-minute coach. These things are what's going to make this change possible, not in 30 or 50 years, but in the next 5 years. And I think we have to view technology as the great enabler. It's what is different today than it was 20 or 30 years ago, and to ignore it and to not develop it so that it is demonetized for everybody, right? This smartphone, whether you have an iPhone or whether you have an Android phone, is your future health coach, your diagnostician, helping you make those steps and changes. And yes, on top of that, we're going to see science understanding why we age, how to slow it and stop it, and maybe reverse it. And I believe that is a possibility.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Jay, for joining the program. And that is a wrap on the discussion portion of the debate. We now move on to our closing round. And in our closing round, each debater gets to make a closing statement of up to 2 minutes. Peter, you are up first for this. Once again, reminding people that our question is, could longevity science extend your health span by decades? Should the government fund it? You are arguing a very adamant yes. Your last chance to explain your case.
Thank you. So I think that humanity can do amazing things. We can pull off things that were thought of as impossible, that were fundamental limits. I believe in our abilities, and it's our intellect and our science and technology that enables these things. It was 30 years ago that I launched something called the X Prize. I organized a $10 million competition for private spaceflight. It was 27 teams, spent $100 million trying to win this $10 million prize. And it was won by Burt Rutan and Paul Allen. And that launched SpaceX and Blue Origin, changed the laws, brought capital in, and changed what we thought was possible in space. A year ago, I launched a $101 million health span X Prize. And this is a competition that has challenged teams with a therapeutic lasting only 1 year to reverse functional loss in muscle, immune, and cognition, to bring you back a decade, as much as 20 years. We have 460 teams that have entered that competition, and they are basically driving this incredible future. To quote John F. Kennedy, who kicked off the original moonshot, it is not enough for a great nation merely to have added new years to life. Our objective must be to add new life to those years. And I think that's what we're talking about here.
Thank you very much, Peter. Zeke, you get the last word in this, your closing statement in which you are arguing no on both the science and the government funding.
I think we need to be clear about what we're aspiring to. Human life is full of potential riches. And what we want is people to be able to live a full human life and have it dedicated to having a fulfilling and meaningful life. We are not trying to get people to obsess about living another few weeks, months, or even years at 90. If we want people to live a full, meaningful human life, they can't be obsessed about their diet, about exercise, and about everything else. They need to be focused on other people, on some good beyond themselves, on values that will live on beyond their life. We need to get the inequality, the people who are at the top in our society, both in terms of income, education, and other positive attributes, are already going to, by and large, live into their 90s and going to live a pretty full life. They have lived healthy and well lives before. It is the problem that we have people at the bottom, 40% of our population, that on average dies before 75. And those are people who we need to really focus on and who we need to bring up. We need to change our focus from increasing life expectancy to increasing the life expectancy of the bottom 40% of our population. And that change in focus, change in measurement is going to be important. And the way to achieve it is the 6 wellness activities. Don't do stupid things, have good, rich social relationships, be mentally engaged, eat well, exercise in the 3 different ways cardiovascularly for strength, and sleep well. We know what they are. Our job now is to make sure every American can do that throughout their lives, beginning early in their lives.
Thanks very much, Zeke. Thanks to both of you. That is a wrap on this debate. So that's what I want to do, is to say thank you, Peter Diamandis and Zeke Emanuel. We so appreciate that you showed up for this, that you talked across a single table with your thoughtful disagreement, and that you taught us some things along the way. It's what we really aim for at Open to Debate. So thank you to both of you for joining us for this one.
Thank you, John. A pleasure to meet you, Zeke.
Great. Nice to be here.
Look forward to seeing you in 20 or 30 years.
That's a nice finish.
On average, both of us will make it there. That's the problem.
Or the wonderful thing.
I want to also thank the other folks who joined the conversation, Tanya, Venki, Corinna, and Jay, also for making the conversation richer and more interesting. And finally, a thank you to you, our audience, for tuning into this episode of Open to Debate. As a nonprofit working to combat extreme polarization through civil debate, our work is made possible by listeners like you, by the Rosencrantz Foundation, and by supporters of Open to Debate. Robert Rosencrantz is our chairman. Clay O'Connor is our CEO. Leah Mathau is our chief content officer. Elizabeth Kitzenberg is our chief advancement officer. This episode was produced by Alexis Pangrazi and Marlette Sandoval. Editorial and research by Gabriella Mayer and Andrew Foote. Andrew Lipson and Max Fulton provided production support. And the Open to Debate team also includes Gabrielle Iannicelli, Annalisa Cochran, Rachel Kemp, Eric Gross, Mary Regis, Savion Jackson, and Linda Lee. Damon Whittemore mixed this episode. Our theme music is by Alex Clement, and I'm John Donvan, your moderator-in-chief. We'll see you next time on Open to Debate.